Hey folks, Gene Gallen here with the Chatham Journal. I also have Ashibo Rojas from the Chatham News and Record. We're back with our Chatham NC Sports Update. And the other thing I just want to do before we start here is just to make sure that we are broadcasting correctly in all the channels. We are on YouTube, good. We are on uh, X, that's good. And we need to get on to Facebook. Let me make sure I'm on Facebook here correctly. Chat list, sports update. We need to get this on. And we should be on shortly. And I apologize about this. The other thing, too, is my credit card got stolen a couple weeks ago. The number was, and we had to my subscription came up on Restream and they couldn't bill me correctly. So let me see here. As we're looking through this, I appreciate all your patience and we should be good. All right, here's the rundown. Basketball is underway big time, of course. We had a lot of tournaments going on, which was nice. And Christmas and holiday tournaments, all the teams were playing. Also, we'll talk about what happened. Ashibo's got in the newspaper. You notice I crossed out Ashibo's Athlete of the Week. There will be no Athlete of the Week this week simply because there were a couple of holiday issues. So Athlete of the Week returns next week. We will have the basketball power rankings. Why? Because you folks like to hear about those power rankings and you like to discuss them and come up with your opinions. So let's get this kicked off. Let me get out of here. Let me get Ashibo on here and we'll be ready to rock and roll. All right, Ashibo, you want to start off with Chatham NC County High School basketball. It's all yours.
Yeah, so like you said, we had some Christmas tournaments, some holiday tournaments going on the past couple of weeks. And starting on the boys' side, biggest one was Northwood. They won the South Granville holiday tournament a couple of days ago. Cam Fowler won the MVP of the tournament. They beat South Granville in the championship game, 63-56. One of their closer games this season, but I think they did jump out to a big lead there in the middle of the game. And I think Cam Fowler had 27 points in that one. And just really, once again, continuing to step up as that main option, that main guy for Northwood this season. So, yeah, Northwood now sits at 10-1, 4-0 in the conference. Going into the second half of the season, starting tomorrow. So Northwood, like we said, at the departure of Trek Powell, Fred Whitaker, also Jake Layton, some of those great seniors last year, they really haven't missed a beat so far this year. And then Seaford, they played in the Sheets Holiday Classic. I think they lost the first game. They came out with some wins at the end of the time. And they're sitting at 5-6, 2-1. They beat Leadership Academy 46-41 in that last game in the Sheets Holiday Classic. So they had a tough loss there, I think, to Western Guilford as well, 3-point loss earlier in the Classic, but finished strong with the win over Leadership Academy. And they'll get back in action tomorrow against Northmore to start their long stretch of conference play with the rest of the conference. And then we had Chatham Charter. They got 2 straight wins in the Ashboro Christmas tournament. They didn't win, unfortunately. They lost their first game in the tournament, but they're sitting at 9-6 and all won in conference play going into the second half of the season. So I think we're looking at their schedule from the tournament. They got wins over Southeastern Randolph 64-46, and then Eastern Guilford 40-33 to close out that tournament. And then they've been struggling a bit this year. They also struggled in the High Country Holiday Class week with losing 3 straight. I mean, since beating Northmore on December 17th. So they're sitting at 2-8 and 1-4 in conference play. Like we said, not the best start for the Jets this year, but we can see if they can get things back on track as conference play goes on. And then our other teams that didn't play any tournaments, just where they're sitting now. Chatham Central 8-1, 4-1 in conference play. They only had that one loss in the conference to Southeast Alamance a couple weeks ago. And then Woods Charter, they're 4-4, 2-0 in their conference, and the Central Tar Heel 1A, and the Central Tar Heel 1A slate. And yeah, Woods Charter, like we said, like we've been saying all year, they really improved from last year. 4 wins already, sitting at 500, including a big win over Chatham Charter a couple weeks ago as well. And then just on the girls' side of things, biggest one, of course, Northwood. They hosted the First Bank Charger Classic once again, and they lost to Union Pines in the championship game of their classic. And in that one, they really just couldn't stop Star in the stats because she had a game. It's my computer. Okay. Yeah, Shanti Fox from Union Pines. She had 43 points in that game. Really couldn't Northwood really couldn't stop her, and they held on and pulled away for the win over the Chargers. So Northwood is now sitting at 7-3, 2-1 in the Mid Carolina 1A 2A conference. Seaforth, and then I don't think they played in the holiday tournament, but they did get a big win over Holly Springs before the break. And in that one, Gabby White scored a career high 32 points. So she's doing some good things as well. Once again, I always bring it up from last year after the loss to North Pitt in the state semifinal. She told him she feels like she's one of the best guards in the country, and I feel like she's been proving that so far this year with Seaforth and where they're at and how she's been playing. But we also had Jordan Matthews. They also played in the High Country Holiday Classic along with the boys. Struggle for them as well. They didn't do too well in that one, but they're now sitting at 2-9 and 2-3 in conference play. And then taking a look at the rest of our teams, Chatham Charter also got some action in the holiday tournament, but lost to Asheboro and Trinity back-to-back games. They've lost, I think, 5 in a row now going into the second half of the season. So they're sitting at 4-11, 1-0 in conference play. Woods Charter 4-3, 1-1 in conference play as well. The Wolves, the Lady Wolves, have won 3 in a row since before the break. So they're entering the second half of the season with some good momentum. And yeah, Chatham Central as well didn't play in the holiday tournament, but they're looking pretty good so far to start the year, sitting at 7-2 and 3-2 in conference play as well, with losses to Seaforth and Southeast Alamance, 2 of the best teams in the conference. So Chatham Central is kind of right where we're not really the goals they want it to be. We're kind of right where they want to be as far as compared to some of the best teams in the conference and then some of the lower teams in the conference. Chatham Central is kind of right between those two extremes there. So yeah, that's just a rundown of what we had the past couple weeks with the holiday with Chatham County basketball. So looking forward to conference play now. Everybody is going to get ready to make their final push towards the playoffs coming up in a couple months. So and we're going to have some exciting matchups coming up. And before we get into that, though, I want to talk about our power rankings for the boys and girls just for today, as we, like we said, go into that second half of the season. And start with the boys. Gene, let me know what you think about this. But going from 6 to 1, at 6, I got Jordan Matthews, 5, Chatham Charter, 4, Woods Charter, 3, Seaforth, 2, Chatham Central, and at number 1, I have Northwood. Because, like I said, and Gene, you probably would agree with me, they haven't really missed a beat from last year, and I think to me, far and ahead, the best team, not just in the county, but also in the conference. Of course, Southeast Alamance did give them a scare a couple weeks ago, but they still put out that win, and I think this is still Northwood is still the team to beat here in the conference as we see how it all plays out in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on Northwood. I'm also going to bring up they played in that Phenom exhibition tournament a few weeks ago before the Christmas and holiday stuff started. And they were actually, let me pull this up, they were ranked on the Phenom tournament rankings right up there. They were showing up as number 9. And if you look at that list, you've got Turnersville, Lake Norman, Green Level. Let's see who else we got. North Mecklenburg, and you've got Northwood up there at number 9. And I know from that tournament, I was out of town when that tournament was going on, but I got to see some of the stuff that Phenom Sports was putting out. and they had Cam Fowler as I think he was one of their top players of that tournament. They also had Mr. Blair on there. They had Chad on there. They had um, who else did they have? They had most of, I think, all the starting five as having played well as a team. So I think you're definitely right. That team isn't just being recognized in the conference; it's being recognized in the Triangle area. So I think you're definitely number one. Yeah, I'm kind of not really surprised. I don't think when we were talking preseason that we had JM all the way towards the bottom. We knew Chatham Central there were going to be some issues, and you were right. I think you saw that after you talked with Coach McNair about Woods being a little bit stronger this year than they were last year. Um, so I would usually, again, I don't usually I do agree with you because you know your stuff. So what's your overall feeling as to, it's too early, but people are already going to start talking about tournament time. Um, what are you seeing as out of the conference? I mean, Northwood's going to be going. Who else is going to be going out of the conference? Chatham Central is going to be going, and then probably Woods Charter because they're going to be in the top of their conference as well. So, what's your feel as to as the season progresses, looking tournament time for the Chatham County schools?
Well, if you want to start with the conference tournament, I think it's going to be really interesting between Northwood and Southeast Alamance, and of course Chatham Central could also be in that mix too. But we've already seen what Southeast Alamance did to Chatham Central at Chatham Central, and they were they were really, I think, 3 points within Northwood in that game when they played a couple weeks ago. So I think that's a matchup to really look out for coming to conference tournament time, but also a playoff time as well when those two go into the 2A tournament, especially if they get to see each other again. It's going to make for some really interesting matchups because both teams have guys that can score, that are really they play really intense defense as well, both at the guard and the front court position. So I think with those two teams, I think Southeast Alamance is a team to give Northwood the biggest challenge out of the conference. But playoff time, I think when we talk about the state playoffs, it's really interesting to see what Chatham Central can do in the 1A tournament because, like we said, every year they get this preparation against 2A teams, against tougher competition, especially in the conference that they're in. And then adding Brennan Oldham, and then with the team they have this year, I mean, a run in the 1A tournament could be very likely for them. Of course, bar they come across a team like a Wilson Prep or maybe not this season, but a team that's stacked with a whole bunch of talent. I think would be what it takes to knock down Chatham Central in the 1A tournament. But I think if they go in with the talent they have and the coaching they have, they could be maybe a state title contender down on the 1A level. And yeah, Woods Charter, of course, I think they're going to have a good chance of getting into the 1A tournament as well as we get down the stretch. And maybe possibly now that they have that experience last year, especially going up against a good team like Chatham Central in that first round, who knows? They might get a playoff win this year as well with the way they've been playing as a team. So yeah, I think we're going to have some pretty interesting things to look out for come playoff time. Of course, especially with Northwood, the thing is, can they make as deep as run they did with Fred Winokur, Jake Layton, and Drake Powell, of course, like they did last year, and compete with some of the best in 2A. So far from what we've seen, I mean, like you said, they've been highly rated amongst the state, from teams all over the state. I think they still have what it takes to do some great things in the 2A tournament as well. But like you said, it's still early, still a long ways to go until we get there. And I'm really excited to see how this conference play is going to shake out.
All right, I got another question for you. I got another graphic popping up. We talked about this with Coach Berry last week, but I'm going to bring it up. One of the things you and I have constantly talked about, not just this year, but last year, was the fact that Chatham Central likes playing up a level. They enjoy playing 2A. Now, this is the preliminary proposal for next year's conference, where Chatham Central and Chatham Charter are in the same conference, but there are no 1A schools in there. So there's 2As. And actually, folks, Shibo had there was an article in the sports section of the Chatham News and Record. Let me go right there. Chatham News and Record last week talking about the new conferences. I get the feeling, and I don't know if this is something we'll want to talk with the Chatham Central coach about, but I got a feeling that they are probably going to schedule a bunch of 2A games next in 2025. What's your feel as to Chatham Central being successful in basketball the way they are?
Oh, are you asking like in terms of the new conference next year?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, if this is what it shakes out to be in the final drafts, yeah, I do see Chatham Central scheduling some more of those 2A games or maybe even 3A. Now they have more of the freedom, and I really would like to see them keep, of course, the matchups with Jordan Matthews and Northwood, maybe even also Seaforth as well. Keep it in the county. But I think when I look at this conference, of course, we know Southern Wake Academy always has a pretty good basketball program and pretty good teams year in and year out. But I still think, from looking at this conference, Chatham Central could still be the best team here with this slate. The only thing is, and, hearing from some people from Chatham Central, that they might not like being in the conference with a whole bunch of charter schools and academies that aren't necessarily that don't necessarily follow the same rules and protocols as a traditional public school. Of course, a lot of these schools in their proposed conference can bring in kids from wherever to play, which is kind of putting Chatham Central at a disadvantage because they can't exactly do that in the same way. So that'll be interesting to watch to see how that shakes out. And maybe that'll be a concern of the North Carolina High School Athletic Association when looking at these conferences, because I know that was kind of a point that was brought up with maybe putting the charter schools in their own classification, have their own conferences, because that would be fair with how, players can come in and out of schools. But even with that, I mean, we know that the program Coach Burke has, the culture that's at Chatham Central, they're dedicated, to bringing a winning basketball program for the boys and the girls. I still see them, even if they're at a talent disadvantage down the road, I still see them having pretty good success in a conference like this.
Let me take this one off. Let me ask you another question. Let's talk Chatham Central versus Seaforth, because you've got Northwood first, Chatham Central second, and Seaforth third. What are you seeing with what Coach Berry's doing with Chatham, with Seaforth? Because when Chatham Central played against Seaforth, the varsity game turned out to be an interesting game, going down to, I think, with the last 3 seconds. So, what's your feel as to what's going on with Seaforth?
Yeah, so Seaforth, I think it's a really interesting team because they played, they played a little up and down going in the beginning with some of the non-conference play, especially starting the year with 3 straight losses. And that first game against Scarborough was a really close one that I felt they really could have pulled out and won at the end. It's just some late game execution didn't work out for them. But I mean, they picked up some pretty good wins also in non-conference play. And of course, yeah, like you said, the Chatham Central game was probably one of their most impressive performances so far this year, probably the best team they played this year. And I think with Coach Berry, we talked to him, his coaching style, he really, of course, wants his guys to play hard, especially on the defensive end. And I think that's what we saw in that Chatham Central game. And we know he really likes to scheme and come up with, a bunch of unique ways to stop certain players or, certain schemes from the opponents. And yeah, against Chatham Central, everyone knows you gotta cover Reed Albright and you gotta limit Brennan Oldham. And I think, with Coach Berry, he's really good at coming up with ways to execute those game plans and put his team in the best position to knock off some of these really good teams that they'll go against. So yeah, I think with Chatham Central, I think Coach Berry did a good job of getting his team ready to play, especially in that environment at Chatham Central. And I'm really interested to see how that turns out against Southeast Alamance and Northwood next week. They'll have Southeast Alamance at Southeast Alamance on the 7th, and then they'll host Northwood on the 9th. So two tough games back to back next week, and we could possibly see, like we said, another gritty performance from his team, maybe even the upset. Just kind of, I feel like this team is talented enough to where you kind of never know what you could get from Seaforth on a nightly basis. So it'll be interesting to see how they step up against the two bona fide best teams in this conference next week.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. And folks, I posted down there on the bottom the games that I'm able to shoot, both pictures and videos. You'll be able to find the videos over at the YouTube channel that we've got going. You want to talk about girls basketball any before you get into what you have in the paper this week?
Yeah, the girls basketball power rankings. And just starting from 6, I have Jordan Matthews there at 6, Woods Charter at 5, Chatham Charter at 4, I got Chatham Central at 3, Northwood at 2, and Seaforth at 1. And yeah, just and Gene, you can chime in on this as well. But Seaforth, to me, like I said, Seaforth and Northwood coming into this year, we're going to be the top 2 teams I felt in the county and of course in the conference. Now Southeast Alamance as well has made their way into that top 3 there in the conference. But the way Gabby White's been playing, Katie Leonard and Seaforth as a whole, the way they've also kind of incorporated some of the younger girls that are coming up and getting more playing time this year has been really impressive. And they also really haven't missed a beat from last year, even after the departure of Sydney Ballard. She's at Northwood now, and Jocelyn Gesner, two of their big pieces at the down low. So yeah, Seaforth, I still got them at the 1 spot. Northwood also been playing some really good basketball this year, but they just played some really tough teams and come up short in some of those games, like against Union Pines. But when it's still going to be a really, really interesting matchup when those two teams play next Thursday on the 9th at Seaforth, because of course you have the history between those two, the rivalry. And of course, last year when we had the tournament game where Northwood did knock off Seaforth after they gave us 2 pretty good games earlier in the year and then met in the playoffs as well. So I think that's going to be one of the best games we see all year next week with Seaforth and Northwood. And of course, that's going to determine for me who's going to get the 1 spot in the power rankings between those two, because I don't see anybody knocking down those two from the top 2 spots throughout the rest of conference play and the rest of the season.
Let me ask you the question on Seaforth and Northwood. That game on the 9th, that's going to be a Seaforth. Is that right?
Yes, that's at Seaforth.
Okay. I would agree. I think, as you said, Seaforth's up here, Northwood's down here, and I know there's people going to be in the county that are going to hate me for this. And then the rest of the teams are there's a big gap between Northwood and Seaforth and the other teams on that power ranking of 6. And I think it's going to be tougher for Northwood to beat Seaforth this year, because you and I have seen Seaforth play, and the girls have it set up where they played with each other for several years. They know their positions. If you attack or try to double team on one of the players, they've got at least 2 other outlets that they can go to, and you got some heavy duty 3-point shooters on that team as well, and they're comfortable with it. Plus, as you said, with Gabby, it's actually pretty to watch it. And Northwood also has similar type of players who will go in and just come in and lay up a nice 2 points and be able to slide in between the defenders. So my feeling of this year is actually Seaforth's a bit stronger than Northwood is this year compared to last year. What's your feeling between those two?
Yeah, I think I would agree with you. I think Seaforth is stronger than Northwood. Now, I think it is. To me, I feel like it's still closer than it was last year between the two teams. I think Northwood did get a little better with their roster and what they've had. But, I mean, Seaforth, we talked to them before the season started. I mean, they're hungry. They're on a mission. They had a bad taste in their mouths from the way last year ended. And, I mean, the past couple of years, they've had their sights set on winning a state title. And I think that's just the difference between the two teams is Seaforth has that experience. And like you said, they played together for so long. with that core of girls, and it's really on display this season, even with what they lost and what they're returning with, and the new players that they're installing into that system. So, and like we said, with Gabby White, I mean, she's very hard to stop on the floor and both ends on the floor. She can guard your best player, and she can also score on just about any player that you put on her on the court as well. So I think if she gets going, it's really hard to beat the C4 team, because you worry about her, then you also have to worry about Katie Leonard knocking down shots from the outside, and the other shooters as well that they have on this team. So yeah, I agree. I think I kind of agree with what you're saying with where Seaforth and Northwood at this year are compared to last year, but I think it is a little bit closer because I think Northwood is a better team than they were last year. We just have to see how it all plays out when these two teams play each other on the 9th, and then they'll get another chance against each other on the 31st.
All right, let me ask you another question. We were both at the championship game last year when Seaforth lost. I think they won't go into that game this year if they land up in the championship game that they did last year. Now, based on the fact that they're in a 2A, 1A conference, and this is what's the projection for next year is the 5A conference, where they're going to be competing against similarly sized schools. There's not going to be any 1A schools in there or whatever or anything below. It's all 5A. Is this year, in your opinion, their best opportunity to win a state championship for the Seaforth girls basketball team?
I mean, for the foreseeable future, I would say so, and that's really not really because of the conference. I think, with Seaforth and the culture they've built already, I think they'll be fine in their conference and eventually adjust to playing against teams with more kids as well. But this year, I think is their best chance of doing it because, of course, Gabby White's a senior. This is her last year. I mean, she's kind of, she's proven herself to be kind of a generational player for the high school level, and you're not going to come across many like her once again. So I think with that reason, with this being her last year, winning a state championship is very important for them. And as well, she's so important to that core with Katie Leonard, like we said, and more as well. That's also been a pretty key shooter for them. I mean, this is the year to do it. And like we said, they've already had that experience. They've been there. They've been to the state championship. They've been back to the Final Four, so they know how to play in those environments against some of the state's best teams. And with how they performed, like we said, against some good teams already, I mean, they're looking like they're in postseason form already. But knowing Coach Bird, knowing the mindset of that team, they probably don't feel that way. And that's the thing too. They always want to improve and are pretty hard on themselves in those games and what they could always do better. So yeah, this is their best chance at making that run and closing Gabby's career out with that ring. I think that's really what they want to do here. Especially, I know that's what she wants to do. Like I said, talk to them before the season started, and yeah, they're aiming for the highest of the high, which is that state title.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, they're going to be playing Northwood next in the 9th. And folks, you know what? If you're not doing anything on the 9th, go and as Shibo said, a generational player, go see both teams go up against each other, and you'll see some exciting basketball. This is a good year for basketball here in Chatham County. All right. Do you want to go into what you got covered? I think that's pretty much we've got what's been going on in the basketball. Do you want to go into what you've got in the Chatham News and Record? There is no athlete of the week this week, folks, so that's coming back next week. But do you want to go into what you've got in the paper this week?
Oh, no, I don't have anything in the paper this week because, like we said, we had the 2 holiday papers for New Year's and Christmas. So, but I will have content for starting back next week for Thursday's paper on the 9th.
Okay. Well, in that case, I am going to remind folks, and I forget who I was talking to about this. Ashibo has an X account, Ashibo R38. If you need to, in between when the papers come out on Thursday, you need to follow him because one of the things that he's been doing that I've gotten a lot of feedback. Actually, got to talk to you run into people when you're out there. Folks in the county appreciate the fact that he's out there covering that stuff and posting it on X. And the other thing too that he does on X is after a game, he usually will get in a interview with the coach as well as a few players. So we definitely want to be able to go in on that. Any other sports we need to cover? Because this, I think there were some wrestling matches. And folks, I apologize. I was out of town, so I didn't cover a lot of stuff. But Ashibo is the sports writer, sports reporter in the Chatham County, so he can give you the full rundown. Is there anything else besides basketball we need to touch on?
Yeah, we can also shout out two Seaforth wrestlers, Gabe Rogers in the 120-pound division and Ethan Kubal in the 215-pound division. They are in first place for their weight classes at the Tiger Holiday Classic on the 28th. They will also win. I think Seaforth also went 5-1. They competed in the baddest cat on the mat team duels also during the holiday season and did well. I think the only team they lost to in those duels was Union Pine. So Seaforth once again just looking like the best wrestling team here in the county, one of the best in the state. Of course, one of the best in 2A as well. So yeah, congrats to those guys on some more first place finishes in those individual tournaments over the holidays.
Yeah, I suspect you and I will be covering them in the state tournament coming up down the road. They did well last year, won the championship, and I figure they've got a strong team again. Coach Armstrong and the other coaches there have been leading those guys, and they've had some great competition. Anything else we need to talk about?
Nope. Of course, we'll have a lot more to talk about next week once all the sports get back underway. As far as swimming and wrestling as well. Wrestling, yeah, like you said, it's coming down to the end of the season in wrestling. I think the conference tournament will be coming up at the end of this month, so looking forward to that because we also had this season. Chatham Central has been doing pretty well as a wrestling team, and of course, we got to see what the girls do. With some of the first timers around the county this year in the Mid Carolina 1A 2A conference. So that'll be an exciting event later on this month.
Yep, looking forward to that. All right. Do you know where you're going to be in the next week? I haven't made up my schedule yet, so I don't know. I'm sure I'm going to be at some games, but it sounds like you're going to be at that Seaforth game on the 9th, and you're going to be at a game on the 7th. Is that right?
Well, actually, tomorrow I will be at Seaforth for their games against Northmore, boys and girls. And then, of course, next week I will be at Seaforth once again on the 9th for the Northwood game. So I know those two in between, not too sure yet, but I know those two basketball games for sure. I will be there covering those.
All right, folks, that's where Ashibo's going to be. I'm not going to be at that game tomorrow. I'm not going to be in any games tomorrow. I got to be down in Charlotte, but I will be at some things next week. And then remember, pick up the paper next Thursday because it's going to be full of sports stuff written up by Ashibo, as well as the sports athlete of the week. I know the players like it when they're selected, the parents like it, the fans like it, the kids like it. So everybody likes that. All right, folks, that's it for this week. We'll see you back next Thursday at noontime. I hope everyone had a good Christmas holiday season and also a Happy New Year.